we should be okay. I'll wear the microphone if they get that working too, Debbie, just let me know. I'm Rick Vesey, I'm the director here at Lakeview Academy, so welcome to our school. I've been here, this is my 4th year here, and I moved out to Utah from Florida 7 years ago. So my first 3 years I was at Renaissance Academy out in Lehigh, and then I came here 4 years ago. So, our school here, it's kindergarten through 9th grade, and so let's see, it's lunchtime now, so this hallway will be quiet for a little while, and then it'll get loud again, and then middle school will make all the noise upstairs as they move around. We're not that, I wouldn't say we're overly strict here, so kids make noise and they have a good time, so it should be okay in this room. Let's see, any other background stuff you want to know about me? Before I was in administration, I was a math teacher for grades 6 through 9 in Florida. Really enjoyed that, had a good time. I actually went to school to become a rich computer programmer, and that just never happened. I was actually a teacher aide while I was in college, and then I got my bachelor's degree in management information systems, and was offered a teaching job to teach math while I was job hunting, and I fell in love with the career. And so I just changed my career and went back to do my master's in ed leadership. All of my studies were done in Florida before I moved out here. So, as we go through today's training, be very comfortable. Restrooms are just right out here to the right. It's the first door on the right. It's actually through that wall right there, so it's not very far. And take stretch breaks. There's food back here, and we'll just keep it casual. The process that we're going to go through is fun. I would encourage you that this, as I was putting the slides together, this is not necessarily for me a session where I would say, here's how you log in. This is the link you click on in order to fill this out. The state will offer very specific training to do that, and I would encourage you to sign up for those. But in this mentor process, we can certainly be of help to everybody with, when you're in your system, what does this question mean, and how would you answer this question if you were running our school, or that comes up a lot. So, and every school's so unique. Standing here is a lot of fun for me. I go to the directors meetings that a lot of you probably attend as well each month. But I kind of forget when I'm running this school how many other people are doing the same thing in the state of Utah. So thanks for the work you guys do. And for those of you who are starting next year, will do. And for those of you in your first year this year, thank you. That's a lot of work. And hopefully you enjoy what you're doing. I try to write down people's names as you were going over them. So I'll try to use your name. If I say it wrong, please correct me so that I can make sure being respectful there. Because I'm running this off of my computer, I'm going to go back and forth to move slides around here so that Debbie can fix everything else. Have you guys seen Different Strokes? Probably not in a long time. But what's the most famous line in that television show? There it is. What you talking about, Willis? All right, so let me just show you this quick video. I think it's funny. So let's see. Actually, I'm going to...
I can't afford a taxi. Get a job. Arnold, that's the whole idea in the first place. Willis needs a job. You get the picture? I'm unemployed. Then why don't you collect unemployment insurance? Arnold, to collect unemployment, you got to not be working at what you're working at before you stop working. What you talking about, Willis?
Just a quick summary. Sometimes I feel this way with state reporting and the required reporting. Where he's like telling them, well, you first have to do this before you can do this, and then you're able to do this. There will be times where you're filling out reports where they're asking for information you don't have, yet you have to submit it by a deadline that comes before the data comes. That happened this year for those of you. We had to turn in our K-3 reading reports before we had the SAGE scores in order to put into this report. Go with it, okay? It will be okay. Things work out in the end. But there's going to be many times where you look to someone else in your offices and you're like, what are they talking about? This doesn't make sense. And there's going to be times even where you've done these reports year after year, they make a change, and you ask yourself, what is this all about? If you haven't printed this off yet, definitely want to do that. From what I understand, this will go out. But on the USOE website, this is the link that Marlise puts out each year, usually in August. It's under the, go to USOE, departments, look under charter schools. It's under the forms and resources. And I believe it's the very first one on there. And what it is it's this form right here. And it takes the entire calendar school year, and she has in here dates and deadlines of the reports that are required of all of us.
I also link that report to our website.
Perfect.
So ours is easier to find than theirs
Good.
sometimes. So just FYI.
Not as varied.
And this is another one, go with it. Sometimes it gets updated quickly, and other times it doesn't come out as quickly as you'd want it to come. But I would encourage you, just print this off. And then the next step is really unique to your schools, especially those schools in your first year. You wear all the hats, all right? You feel like you're going to be a conductor who's trying to get everything done and sounding the way it should. I encourage you, one of the first things you'll want to do in your positions, and so those of you who are already in a school, you see this happening, I hope, building capacity of those around you. You don't have to be responsible for every report on here. You have to make sure they get turned in on time, but other people they can log in, they can complete reports, and you just make sure that it's done accurately. First to admit, I do not do all these reports. I'm accountable for all of them to my board, but I don't do them all. I just make sure they get done and they're accurate. So the first thing I would do is print this off and then go through each month, and you highlight the ones that you know you're responsible for or are more of a concern to you. And then you can go into your Google Calendars or whatever and start putting these things in. This comes out before your school year starts. So if you do this at the beginning of the school year, you're less likely to forget about important deadlines and report dates. The state will be kind to you in lots of ways. Missing deadlines, not usually the case. They really want to hold to these deadlines.
Does it change a lot from year to year? Or do you find that generally what's expected in a certain month stays?
Yeah. Generally, it's the same. The formatting of this has not changed for years and years. There's been, like with Sage, there's been a couple of things, CRT and Sage, there's been some switching around of that information. Land Trust was a little different this year because they're changing their website, and they've had to move some dates around because the website wasn't ready. But for the most part, it's pretty consistent. This will help for this training. It'll help me anyway. Is there any school that does not already have a business manager or someone like Red Apple or Charter Solutions that are helping with the school's finances? Okay.
But we're both a couple years out.
You were,
Okay. All right.
18 months out.
Okay.
That's right. Don't overestimate that time frame.
So consider that as an option because there's monthly reporting for your first years. The report is not that difficult. Just making sure your software that you're using to run your books is accurate and lined up. It's all by the object codes of salaries and wages and services, outside services. So if your books are set up the same way the state wants it, it's a pretty easy report to do. But that is a monthly one that you get to do along with your finances and your enrollment. And I think that's like the third link underneath this one when you get there. And Tina's probably got it on their site too. But that's, for most of you, your business office, they're responsible for that. So you're going to see that when you go through this, and you're going to say, all right, I don't have to do that one. Because it's not something that you necessarily have to put all those numbers in. They can do that for you. You just make sure that they meet the deadlines. Never mess with funding, right? Especially in your first years. You need to make sure that you're getting those things in. So if nothing else, you walk out of here today, make sure you know how to get to this link, because this is going to answer the what do I turn in when. The other nice thing that Marlise has done for us is in the notes section of this, it tells you who you're emailing this to. Who do you call if there's questions? And we will all be making these calls and emails because our schools are unique. It's not just, the way you answer a report is going to be different than the way I do. And so we might need to call these contacts and say, how am I supposed to write this out? So make sure you do tackle that and take care of those right away. Most of you in your first year, special ed directors at the Spectrum, you probably have quite the staff, I hope, so that you don't have to fill out some of these special ed reports. But special ed reporting ties to funding, so you're going to want to know who is going to be in charge of that as well. Again, the reports aren't overly difficult, there's just a lot to keep in mind. It's probably most helpful for a group like this. Is there any specific reports that you're nervous about, or that you had specific questions that you were hoping would be answered during today's training session? Yes.
Specifically on the budget reporting, the monthly budget reporting that you submit to the state, in the startup here, is that required on a monthly basis?
Yes, it's in the planning phase and your first year of operation is what the state requires. Unless they tell you something different, which get it in writing and then just know what it is. But that report is, I don't know if it's strategic. So Tina was my board president for a little while, and Joy Lynn Lincoln, she's on my board as well. But I joined their school in about their 4th year of operation, and I came to Renaissance in their 2nd or 3rd year of operation. So I have not sat in your shoes when it comes to the very first year. And so there's some questions I may not know the answer to. But that report itself, it's a link right on there that you submit. And it's global numbers, so they're not asking you how many paper clips you bought, but it will want to know how much you spent in supplies. And so if you've already set up your software, your finance books, you'll know the object, what is it, 100 to like 800 or 900, and then everything fits inside of there somewhere with income and expenses. All right, any other specific questions? All right, let's dive into it. For those of you who are in your first year, you know all about this. For those of you in your planning phase, this is really important. This is a report that you don't necessarily do yourself, but you need to make sure it's happening. There's an outside auditor that will come to your school on October 1. And if October 1 falls on a weekend, it's the Monday following that weekend. On October 1st, you'll have an auditor who shows up at your school, and they will be taking a look at your SIS system, so your attendance records, the class rosters, and they'll go to do a couple of visits to different classrooms, just spot checking. I know when charter schools first started, there was this big, parents that would get an email or a phone call that says, make sure your kid's here on October 1st because we really need this. It's not like that. If a kid has the flu and he's not there, you're not getting docked money. That's just, if the auditor goes to 6 rooms and all 6 of them happen to have 6 kids who are sick, now they're going to start asking questions like an auditor would. But in most cases, life happens, you have a couple absences, but they're going to be looking for consistency in your SIS, whatever that is. If you use the free system that the state has, SIS, what is it, Aspire, I think is what we call it. What are the other ones out there? Power School, used to be RenWeb. I think that one's kind of going away because they're not keeping up with reports. Anyway, whichever one you choose to go with. We use SIS, and it works just fine for us here. But so this is a big day. The whole process will take approximately 20 to 30 minutes, but it has such a significant meaning to you when it comes to your budget. This is your enrollment number. Again, this is where you build capacity. On this visit day, I meet the auditor, and I get to say, how you doing? And glad you're here. But my secretary is the one who sits down with them, pulls up the SIS attendance records and everything else for this individual. So build the capacity there of your staff so that you don't feel like you're the one-man band. I never really liked the sound. What was it, Mary Poppins, where I thought it was the first time I heard a one-man band where the guy was hooked up to it, and it doesn't really sound good to me. But when you're conducting an orchestra, it really can sound great. So build the capacity of someone to help you here. If you end up doing this because finances are the way they are and your office staff is really slim, it's okay. Don't stress over this one. The auditor comes from USOE, so it's not something that you have to pay for. It's just they come in and do their job. The auditor will probably have in the neighborhood of 10 schools to visit that morning. So they just say, we'll be there between 10 and noon. It's like the cable guy. We'll be there between these time slots, and you receive them when they get there. Any questions on this one? So when you print off the When you print this off, you're going to see that on there in October, okay? And that's the only prep work you do for that. Just make sure that your SIS system is accurate so the visit goes well. There's nothing really to print off ahead of time. The auditor will come and say, will you please print off a first grade class, a third grade class, and a middle school art class. You know, they just kind of, they choose what they want to see. Nice auditors will come in and say, will you print off 3 from each grade level? And then you get to choose whoever's sitting at the computer. But it doesn't really matter. I think I got through there. Oh, keep it simple. I wrote this on here. How many of you are located fairly close to another charter school? Within driving distance, where parents are choosing your school or another. I've seen some mean things over the last 7 years when it comes to this October 1 count, where a student left my school and they want to enroll over another one, and it's September 29th, and we're like, well, if we hold on to this, then we're going to get the money. And I would just ask, play nice, you know, because it goes both ways every time. We'll have a kid who shows up on September 27th and starts school, but we'll lose a kid the day before October 1. When people start doing sneaky things and holding on to exit papers, and it just gets ugly. And so as you start up your school, we know the importance of having full enrollment, but just keep it simple. I should mention too that when you first start school and you print this off, there's nothing really major your first month of school. So you really can focus on being a principal and running your school and getting your teachers set and your kids established. The state doesn't attack us too badly with long reports. This one right here, Cactus, this is the system that you will use to verify your teacher's qualifications. Especially in your first year, they're going to be, you know, as funding, it's not such a big deal, but it really comes into play when, if you want to amend your charter, if you want to go to the school board for any reason, there's always going to be a board member or two who they look at your list of teachers and they always want to point out, well, it looks like you have 3 teachers who aren't certified. Tell me about it. Cactus is what helps you get that set. And then this final Cactus report is your chance to make sure that things are accurate in that system, because that's what the school board will look at when you come to amend your charter or ask for more seats in any way, anything like that. This system, most schools get 2 people who have access to Cactus. It's not something that a lot of people in the school work with. It's a pretty, there's a back end to it where USOE can actually just make sure that it's accurate, but there's a lot of power behind that login. You basically can click boxes and say that a teacher has met the requirements. And so you don't give that access to anybody in the school unless you know that they're in a position to make that judgment call of whether or not they did do their portfolio or they did their suicide prevention training and completed their number of points. All of that stuff, there's just simple check boxes they go through. I think I actually have a screenshot. This is a screenshot of one of the screens inside Cactus. It's pretty basic software, but when you do your final, all this information is redundant, but then it'll have your teacher's name and then their assignments. And this is one of the areas where you and your secretary, or depending on who's doing this at your school, you need to verify that their assignments are accurately reflected in Cactus. And that's what this final report is doing. This is done, let's say this is done in September, we can double check. You get more time than that, it looks like. October 1st is the deadline for this one, or at least that's what it was this year. But by that point, again, things have hopefully stabilized. If you run a high school and junior high, you know that teacher schedules can change in those first couple weeks because of attendance and enrollment numbers. So there is time to continue to go back in and make changes as you need to. Or a teacher, this will happen to you, the teacher you had hired to teach 4th grade does not show up the day all the other teachers come. Never bothered to call you, and then you find out they took a different job and just didn't tell you. So they give you a window there to make changes in Cactus. Build capacity. This is something where, again, 2 people at the school can have access to this. I actually have it set up at my school. I don't have access to it. I gave it to my secretary, and I gave it to, we have what's called an educational coordinator who works with teachers on licensure. And so that's something where the way we have it set up is I meet with teachers to make sure they met requirements, and then I authorize somebody else to click the boxes. But you'll have your own school and get to decide how you want to set that up. There's a lot of screens to Cactus. But this is the one you'll look at this report and you'll scroll down to see. And I would just point out too, Miss Batchy, she's my 5th grade teacher, so she only has 1 line because she teaches all subjects. But when you have a high school and a junior high, this same teacher, Miss Beck, she's going to take up whatever lines her courses are. And so she's my art teacher, so we have all these different courses that she teaches. She has several Art Foundation 1 classes, but it's only going to take up 1 line. It's per course, not necessarily per class period she teaches. And then you put in the percentages of how much of her time is spent on those. If it's not in Cactus, it doesn't exist. And so really help your teachers stay on top of their own certification. I don't want to be mean to my teachers, but I really think they own their own license. And so I want to be supportive. And we have staff members here who help them. But ultimately, they need to make sure that Cactus reflects their work and their effort, their degrees, their years of experience. And they can make that happen. But if they come to you and say, well, this isn't working, can you help me? I can help you, but I would make them do it. You're very busy. You can't spend all your time chasing their license. It's part of them holding their job is to verify that they're qualified to do so. That's how I feel about it. All right. Any questions on this report? Cactus, Final Cactus. It's called Final Cactus, and then you do it again during the year, so there's a Final Cactus. That's the, what you talking about, Willis? I thought we did this already. All right. CTE, for those of you who have CTE, if you go up into the junior highs, you receive funding for this, so of course there's a report. In most schools, your CTE teacher, if you have more than one, you're going to have a head of that department probably, or at least a person who wears the hat of being responsible for getting this form completed. Your signatures are required on this form, so it's another one of those where you may not be filling this form out, but you're going to make sure you approve this form before it is faxed in. On this form, it's mostly what you're going to be doing during the course. It talks about the percentage of the course that's going to cover the different subject areas of CTE. All of that is dictated to the teacher really through the course description. So as long as they aren't doing anything outside of what they should be doing in a CTE class, this form is really straightforward when it comes to what are we teaching in the class and the percentages. The part where you get a lot more flexibility is in the expense part. What are you going to do with the money? And so the CTE teachers, they go to training usually every other year. Every CTE teacher is going to be going to training this summer because they're changing the program. And in that training, they walk them through acceptable expenses. They walk them through helping them understand that if you buy a 3D printer, who's getting to use that because it was spent with these funds. And so really work with your CTE teacher on understanding that before they bring it to you. Otherwise, you just spend your time going through, and it might be 50 things they're buying. So you go through each one. Okay, what are you using Play-Doh for? What are you buying these circuits for? Hopefully you don't get yourself in that position because they've done it the right way. But it is your duty to verify that the expenses are actually supporting the kids that the funding is for. And then you just get to initial it, sign it, and then fax it into the CTE department. And on that printout that I mentioned, it tells you exactly the faxing number and who to send it off to. So that one is usually also, I think that one's also in October. You do one at the beginning and then you do one at the end of the year to go through your expenses of what you actually incurred during the year. Yeah. Okay, so these were some of the easier ones. You ready to go to Yucca? How are we doing? Okay. Yucca, the best named report ever. Our consolidated application. It doesn't feel consolidated when you sit down and work on the UCA, especially your first year out of school. There are some nice things in the UCA where it allows you to basically copy and paste last year's report into this new year's report, and then you just simply edit changes that happen. But in your first year, you're going from scratch. The UCA itself it's a group effort usually. Your business office is going to help you, and then you and your teachers are going to fill out a lot of the other information. As far as logins go, it's usually you and your business office. It's basically who logs in. So anytime you have teachers helping you with some of the reports or some of the answers to questions in the UCA, you are still the one that goes in, types it in, and makes sure that it's reflecting your school accurately. In most of your schools, your board is going to want to review the UCA before you submit it. And that's something that you'll want to work with your board members to make sure they know what the UCA is and get understanding if this is something they should approve before it gets submitted. Raise your hand if you know what the UCA is. I guess I should get a general idea. Okay, let me go through this one. This is the one that gets you all of your funding. Well, most of your funding. A significant part of your funding comes from UCA. There's a lot of layers to it, but it is not overly difficult. The worst that happens is you submit it, and then it gets reviewed by somebody at the state office, and they say, we reject it because, and then you go back in and you make those changes. It can delay your funding. So if you're getting rejected, they're not going to give you those funds until it's been approved. So the sooner you're approved, the less holdup there is in your quarterly submissions and all those things that come to you. And in your first years, that's really important. You can't really delay and miss payroll. So you'll have to make sure that you get this done as quickly as you can. If you go with someone like a Red Apple or Charter Solutions or something, obviously they have more years experience and they help walk you through this. But we'll spend a few minutes and I'll give you some of my opinions to try to make that easier for you when you're working on your own report. The UCA itself, I would encourage you to become a data head. It helps. If you don't really particularly like data, just like it for this reason then, because every one of them are going to ask you for data. If you submit it without data and percentages and SMART goals, it will be rejected. So just, if nothing else, know your school's data so that you can complete this accurately. This report itself, it comes in fairly early in the year, but so it's one of those where if you wait until the week before, you're not going to submit it on time. It just takes too much time. So you want to pace yourself going through this one and try to get it all turned in on time. This year it was due November 1st, and they actually pushed that out a little bit because of the SAGE scores. So that's where I think one of you asked, are the dates fairly consistent? Yes, but they will email you sometimes and say you have an extension of 2 weeks or whatever because it just can't be done. There are 5 parts to the Consolidated Application report, and there's a slide for each one so we can kind of break it down and summarize those for you. And we'll go probably for about 10 minutes or so, and then maybe we take a break and see how you're doing. The Consolidated Application, again, the first section itself is the consolidated part. It's consolidated because this is taking a lot of the federal funding that you select to take. There are schools who choose not to accept any Title I funds. You opt into these funds. So if you're a school board and you choose not to take Title I funds, then you won't have to complete this part. And that's how the title funding works. And it's not fair for me to say everybody does, because they don't. When I first came to this school, it was newer, and the school I was at before never made the change. They never accepted it. And so it's something where you decide. Now, what is Title I funds? When you see Title I, you want to think of intervention programs that you do for students who have been identified. Well, what students are we identifying in Title I? These are students who participate in the free or qualify for free and reduced lunch. So your percentage is what they use, but the intervention programs are really for all kids. So just because a student is measuring intensive in reading, and they don't get free or reduced lunch, does not mean that you can't spend Title I funds on them. They can participate in those programs, but the state needs some way to select how they're going to fund you, and that's what they've chosen. So your percentage comes from the free and reduced. Yes,
And I think there's two kinds, there's targeted, like Canyon Rim
Yes,
is a
great.
targeted.
very good.
And then
Yeah,
there's
targeted
whole school.
assisted and then
Yeah.
school-wide.
Yeah.
Some of your schools might be located in an area where you actually will have a high enough percentage of students on free and reduced lunch where you are, your school-wide Title I.
That's a lot more money,
Lot
but it's
more
a
money.
lot more
Yes.
reporting.
Very good, thank you for pointing that out. Do any of you know for sure that your school, well, you anticipate your school is going to be school-wide Title I? You were, good, okay.
What
So,
are the
do
requirements for that? How do you?
you know the percentage, it's,
No, the
I mean,
percentage
our school's
changed
at
for the
about
amount of free and
18%,
reduced
we're
lunch.
not.
I think it's 35.
is it above 35? Okay.
I think any school can be a targeted school,
Yes.
but it's only those with a certain percentage that can be all school.
All school.
Yeah, let me write that down, so I can find it. I mean, there is a magic
Yeah.
percentage that it will get
I
for
just
you.
know that we've gone back and forth throughout the last 2 years. Should we take the funds or should we not take the funds?
Right.
We're taking the funds, and none of us really have an idea
Okay.
of at what point we should decide to take them. And I don't know. I guess I need more guidance on that. 'cause-
I could just say, like Canyon Rim, we're a targeted school, and we get like 30,000 a year. And it's definitely worth it. We pay for our teacher assistants with it.
And this is the only thing that you have to do to receive those
Yeah,
funds.
we just do it through,
Yeah.
okay, yeah. And it's definitely worth it because
And
we couldn't.
what is the percent, if you don't mind me asking, that you're at free and reduced lunch?
Oh, I don't even know, because I don't do UCA, my assistant principal does. So I don't know the percentage, but I can find out and let you know. But
Is it paid per student, or is it a?
Yeah, they take your,
yeah, the percentage of your free and
your
reduced.
free and reduced, like, for
Uh-huh.
example, like I said, we're about 18%. And so that percentage goes into a formula. And a percent is a percent of your population. So, you know, that also goes off your October 1 count. So the more kids you have in your school, higher percentages means more funding. At 18% with 970 kids this year, we received about 57,000 for Title I. And exactly, it's one of those things where most of you will say, we have these intervention programs in place already. We should probably take the money. There are, what are they called? Joy Lynn would know. Joy Lynn, when you take Title I, what are you have to accept their assurances, thank you. There are a list of assurances that go with this, and that's why, again, this is a board's decision to be looking at receiving these funds, because you are committing yourself to those assurances. As you read through them, I don't think you're going to find anything that
Do you
scares
have
you
to
away.
apply for Title I funds at a certain time of year?
I think it's just through UCA. Oh, we call it UCA, not UCA.
You call it UCA? We should call it UCA because it's yucca.
So you reported in October, and then you receive the funds like in January, February.
Title I is very closely monitored more than other programs, and there's very specific things you need to do. You need to have a parent meeting where you do such and such. You need to have these kind of reports and different things, but we have not found them to be overwhelming at all.
Okay.
You just check them off the list and do them, and it's worth the money to us.
Okay.
Yeah, the amount of time it will take you to get it in place will be hours, just a few hours. The monitoring you do through the year is, as she said, let me close with this and then let's get some lunch. Federal funding is more restrictive, more closely monitored, and it is a lot less money than state funding. State funding, you get more state funding, it is less restrictive, and it is monitored, but not the same level as the federal funding is. So when you're looking through the UCA application or the UCA application, you're going to have opportunities to talk about expenses. And I would encourage you always look for big expenses.
Technology.
Yes, we're talking like a $20,000 worth of computers in a lab. You're talking about a $30,000 salaried position, and the benefits that go with that full-time position. You want to cluster those together as best you can to save yourself reporting. You don't want to be tracking down $30 worth of rulers that you put labels on that said Title I's funded. It's not worth your time or energy, so.
It can go toward personnel too, right?
Absolutely.
Ooh, but be
Most
careful.
people will use it towards personnel, but there's rules to that too. Title I, they have to have an associate's degree or higher in order to even be considered a qualified person. Okay.
It can't supplant,
Yeah, here's the other one, yeah.
it must be a supplemental
Yeah.
program. You can't supplant a teacher's salary with Title I.
Okay, yeah.
Yep.
But like
And that's-
teachers' aides, paraprofessionals.
Yeah,
Paraprofessionals usually, but sometimes you can do it for class size reduction if your school has Title I.
Right, there you go.
And so you can hire someone to do that, but it's supplemental to your regular school program rather than supplanting what's already in place.
That's perfect. See how she worded that? I mean, that's experience right there. No, but that's it. You're doing good things for your kids, but you have to describe it in the right way, because people will just assume that you're trying to get, you're not. You're trying to do good things for your kids, and knowing the difference of how to say that is important. Let's take a lunch break, huh? And then, I don't know, do you want them to eat and I'll just keep talking, or do you want to take a... You need to go too far. Hopefully that was enough of a break. I understand if you fall asleep now that you're full and listening to state reporting. But, continue to ask your questions. That's been helpful for me to know really what to spend the most time on. The one part of Consolidated we did not mention before lunch was the Title IIA. Title IIA is, again, one of those things where it's federal funding. It's usually tied towards your professional development that you do at your school. The money that you spend to help teachers become highly qualified teachers. And so as you look through that, you can look at your school if there's any specific positions who help teachers with licensure or professional development. It's you. The other thing with this, when you look at expenses, is you can also do percentages. And your business office may not like it as much, but you can. You can do percentages. So, for example, part of my salary is paid out of Title I, Title IIA, IDA, and I mean, it comes from different percentages. And you just have to make sure that you have your track monitoring that tracks your hours and the percentage of the time you're spending in these funded areas. So if your school is smaller or you're not sure, well, there's 3 people who helped in this area, you can percentage out their time. For example, I think it's 15% or 10% of my salary I take out of Title I funds because I'm the one who runs the meetings, does the reporting, and follows up with the other people who are working with them and do the observations and evaluations of those working with the kids. So you can think through your work week and what percentage of the time you spend in these areas, and that's another way that you can spend these funds. Any questions on Title I or Title IIA? Those are the most common ones that you would see in the Consolidated Application. All right, let's go to the next part of the UCA. IDA, for some of your schools, this is far more significant than others might see. IDA is one of those where this is your special education and your resource program funding, and it'll come through here. The amount of funding that you get out of here is going to vary every legislative year and every time they want to come up with, we'll call them a bailout, but what was 3 years ago, 4 years ago, there was another incentive program they put out at the federal level that we saw a big push of extra money in there. And then, what was that?
Race to the top.
Maybe that's what it was, the race to the top funding that came. And it was one-time funding that you could carry over. So most schools weren't able to spend it all in their first year, but they carried it over to their second year and some even into their third. That all gets reflected in this part of the UCA, the IDA. This is your special education teachers, this is your instructional aides who are working with students who have an IEP. You really can think big on this one. It can be equipment, so if you have a computer lab in the resource room that you spent these dollars on, that's a doable thing. But you just want to track it. Again, always think of the bigger dollar items that you're spending on these programs. It makes it easier for you to write the report and to be held accountable for it. This one's going to be very unique to your school, so it's probably better to kind of get the one-on-one help with it as you're filling out that part of the report. State funds, it's usually referred to, well, on the report it's state funds, but what you're really looking at is your enhancement at risk funds. These are, again, intervention programs. These are typically your reading and math intervention programs that you might have at your school. They can go into after-school programs or before-school programs. Just depends on the structure you have at your school and want to use these funds for to help students who have been identified as at risk. Again, typically these are students who are scoring intensive in math or reading. It also can be science. Not too many of us have good benchmarks for science intense strategic board benchmark. This one, now that we're dealing with state funds, they are a little bit less restrictive when it comes to who can qualify to spend the money on. State funds, you don't necessarily have to have an associate's degree. It can be an employee who does not have an associate's degree and works with these selected students. Okay. It's kind of redundant to the other parts. Early childhood programs is I think we're up to 4 now, the 4th spot on the UCA. This is the K-3, we always refer to it as K-3 reading money. It can only be money spent on students in kindergarten through 3rd grade. So if you have, like at my school, we have a reading intervention program that we actually use for students K through 6. But anyone who spends time with 4th, 5th, and 6th graders on that same program cannot allocate their time to this funding stream. So I have instructional aides who only work with kindergarten, 1st, 2nd, and 3rd grade students, and we allocate their hours through this funding stream. The ones who work with 4, 5, and 6 work through the state funds. Or if they have an associate's degree, they work through Title I. So you really just need to know your staff. You need to know who's going to qualify so that you can draw it from the correct funding stream. And this is something you usually determine as you're building your budget for next year of who's going to be working with what type of students. The challenge with this is your intervention programs rely on, of course, who's in the seat when you start the next school year. You do your benchmarks usually within the first month of the school year, I assume. And so you identify the students pretty quickly in the year. But from year to year, especially a first-year school, you don't know. You may have 30% of your first graders who measure intensive. And that's going to require more manpower to come in and help these students. So you have a plan, but you may spend more money than you're allocated, and that just comes out of your general funds at that point. So you do what's good for the kids, but you want to allocate as much as you can out of these more specific funding streams first. Empty those out as quick as you can. The general funds you get aren't restricted, so you can buy paper clips with it, or you can pay for employees, whatever you want to do with it. Draw these down first. Make sure you know how you're going to spend these and get that out. I do have one screenshot on here. If you're not familiar with the terminology of Tier 1, Tier 2, Tier 3 instruction, let me just kind of touch on that. Part of your UCA report, it will ask you, what do you do for Tier 1? What do you do for Tier 2? What are you doing for Tier 3? The most basic way I usually teach this, Tier 1 is general instruction. This is any teacher in your building having students in the classroom. So if I were your teacher and you're my students, this is Tier 1 instruction. Tier 2 instruction is when you start to work with interventions. There's a RTI, response to intervention. Your RTI plans, that's where you're now working level or Tier 2 instruction. The students they get both. They get Tier 1 instruction, and we added Tier 2 to help raise those students wherever they need the help. Tier 3, you can think of that more of resources that they receive, special education. Students who have an IEP and they receive additional pullouts because of an identified need, that's going to start qualifying for Tier 3 level instruction. And again, someone receiving Tier 3 instruction is likely receiving Tier 2 and Tier 1 at the same time. It just depends on what that kid needs. So as part of your report, it's going to ask you what you're doing. So just be familiar again with what are you doing for kids. All kids receive Tier 1, great. And here's what we do to make sure Tier 1 is quality instruction. You can talk about your professional development. You can talk about the observations you do and how often you do those observations and meet with your teachers to talk about them. That's all Tier 1 stuff. Tier 2, you talk about your intervention programs. You talk about your instructional aids. You can talk about how the classroom teacher meets with a group of students, every day for 30 minutes while the instructional aide runs the lesson, and they're receiving a pullout for that. So keep those in mind as you fill out this report. you're doing good things for kids, just make sure you can identify it the way they want to see it. They want to see it in these tiered levels. I think I got through all those. So that's early childhood programs, only again, K through 3. And I did mention here, beginning of year, middle of year, and end of year DIBELS testing. The state will tell you what tests can qualify for these measurements. They want the DIBELS, DIBELS next. This is a screenshot of the UCA for part of the K3 reading that I just pulled off of my own here. They go through, this was new, and so I just thought I'd mention it. It was new 2 years ago, and it's caused a headache for a lot of us because it was just new. But we don't have to make it all that complicated. You have to decide for your school if you are A, B, or C. And whichever box you check, then that's the information you're going to provide for them. This is when you measure your students on their reading levels, you're going to decide where do you fit in. Our school decided to be on a 90% trajectory, which means we're trying to get our kids to be 90%.
Isn't that
90% of them.
the law that they've passed for right now is 90% for?
Yeah, this is Governor Herbert is what? He's got a catchy name for it, and I don't remember what it is.
Yeah,
What is it?
So Prosperity 2020, is that the one?
That might be it. I'm trying to remember it.
something.
His goal basically of saying when they reach high school graduation is going, each student will look like this. So this is part of our trajectory to make sure that we have our kids ready in his plans. So this is why we report it this way. They do take into consideration there's going to be schools that have different needs and their students are at different levels. Title I schools, for example, might choose a different path. The report itself goes through and defines the different paths. Whichever path you choose, that's just what you're going to report on. And you want to look at all the options to see what's the best fit for your school. If you do the trajectory of the 90% like we did, then there's actually, in the UCA itself, there's a document that you just download, and it has the spreadsheet. So you can say, all right, well, at the beginning of the year, at the end of the year, last year, this grade level was at 83.5%. The spreadsheet then tells you what your goal has to be for the following year. You don't get to choose. It's just, that's what it is. One year, I filled this out last year when it was new, and I went above what the spreadsheet said. Let's say it said 84.6%. I said we were going to be at 87, because I'm looking at kids. I have 100 kids in a grade level. So it's really easy for me to figure out percentages, to just say, oh, well, these 13 we don't expect, but the rest we do. So I was basing mine off kids. I sent it in with my percentage, and they rejected it. And so I looked at the reason why they rejected it, and they said, does not match the spreadsheet. And I said, so you want me to lower my expectations on this form? And they said, yes. And I said, okay. And I sent it in, and we got our money. And we still helped kids. So don't overthink these sometimes, because then it might get rejected. But follow the spreadsheets on there, and it helps you outline that. These are not numbers that you just have to magically create. They are expecting you to reach that. The problem with these is we know our students move at a diagonal, right, across this spreadsheet. So these are not the same kids I'm measuring. These were my third graders last year who were second graders that year, now becoming. So it is forcing you to step up different groups, and you may have a pocket where one of your grade levels is significantly lower than another grade level. Know that that's coming, and that you'll just have to continue to try to increase them each year as they approach these measurements. Don't dumb down the year before so that the percentages look better or easier to hit. You notice that we weren't at 90% because this is our trajectory to get there. And so if you're a school that's at the 90%, then you're going to be a school that's a C option where you're at 90% and you're just continuing to try to raise the bar from that point. So you'll find the one that fits for you, and then that's the way you fill out this K3 reading program. This one takes, there's quite a bit of data in this one. You do this for kindergarten through third grade, the data, the DIBELS scores. You also talk about the interventions you're doing for students who aren't meeting that expectation. And that's, 2 or 3 sentences, but you do it for each grade level. You copy and paste is what you do, but they need to know that you have a plan for each grade level. So this is one that you can do the plan ahead of time, but you won't necessarily have the scores. So you might do the plan in September, but then you can't finish this part of the UCA until later on when you have the data. Any questions on the K-3 reading? Obviously, if you're a high school, this is a section that you're not doing, so you don't have to worry about this particular part. All right. This one will apply to high schools, and really anyone that has the junior highs as well. Accelerated Student Program. The funding on this, I should just say, for most schools, like my funding for this is about $3,500. Okay, so how much time am I going to spend on this one versus the other? Not a lot. But you identify students who are accelerated. I have a junior high here, so the students I select are the ones in my honors math class. And I select that group of kids as my accelerated class. And I take the $3,500 and I apply all of that to the salary of the math teacher in that classroom. So that is my simple way. I would encourage you to look for a similar way of doing it. If you have high school and you have AP instructors, any of those types of things, you're going to probably look for those groups. This report does require you to report on your AP coursework and kids taking AP classes. So for those of you with the high schools, you'll need to have the data for that part of the report. We go through 9th grade and we do not offer any AP courses, so I just skip those questions. But I do get to answer the questions that go with these kids who have been selected. The information, I don't think I put it on the slide. Oh, I did. You're really tracking them, you're grouping them by gender, minority, their ethnicity report. So it'll say, okay, of the 70 kids you identified, how many are white, Hispanic, African American, and you go through that information. The other part of the information is it asks you, of the 70 kids you identified as accelerated, how many of them topped out in proficiency on the state assessment? So this is one where, again, when we didn't have the SAGE scores, we left it blank. We submitted the application, and then when the scores came out, they said, okay, now you have a new deadline to go back in, redo your UCA, put in the information, and resubmit. So be fluid with this because it just changes from time to time. But if you do it that way, this will be a very quick section for you in the UCA itself. For those of you who have gifted and talented, maybe pullouts or programs or enhancement, you may identify that group and the money that is spent for that program and for those kids. But almost always you're going to choose somebody's salary and just take it from there. All right, that's the last one on the UCA that you really have to worry about. So the UCA, again, those 5 parts, they make up this significant part of your funding. And so just make sure that you spend the time you need building that. One part of the UCA that doesn't really change all that much, and you copy and paste, it's your plan. And that is the longest part of the UCA. And it's not on any of those. It's a separate document that you type out. And basically you're going to take your charter, and you're going to take your board's ends policies, and you're going to mesh it in a nice pretty way to have maybe 10 paragraphs to talk about your school, your purpose. And in those 10 paragraphs, this is where your data head comes in, and you just start identifying things. This is the only part really you have to change from year to year. You'll say, in 2013, our students in 3rd grade scored 85% proficiency on the reading CRT. In 2014, they went up to 87%, and we had a 3% growth. They want to see that kind of observation from you as the school leader to know trends, what's happening with your subgroups. Our students who are categorized as ELL, they went down 7 percentage points in math last year, and here's what we're going to do to address it this year, or our plan to figure this out of why it happened. So it's just a real genuine look at your school, but they want to see the data that matches your assumptions. You just can't say, we're going to focus on writing this year because I went to a great training in the summer and I think it's good. They want to know everything behind that. And that's a plan that sits there, and if you're not, that's the one you can copy and paste. And if you're not careful, you're going to miss a change that you edit in that one, and it's not going to make any sense. They're going to read it, and it'll be the data for 2 years ago in this year's plan, and they're going to reject it and say, you should actually look at this before you submit. They'll say it nicer than that, but that happens. Letters of authorization, Raise your hand if you know what these are. Okay, a couple of you. Letters of authorization is a way that the state's provided for teachers without a license to still be considered highly qualified when you're doing your cactus work and when you are meeting expectations of the school board and the state. So, the way this works is a professional teacher, they can receive 3 letters of authorization in their lifetime. And so, it is, here's what I'll say, there's nothing illegal about doing it, but I would say it's unfair of you to use a letter of authorization for a teacher without letting them know you're going to do this. Because they only get 3. And it's not 3 for your school, it's 3 forever. And so, if you need to use a letter of authorization for a teacher who's not fully licensed, then make sure they're on the same page. And there's totally good reasons to do this. You may have a teacher, I had a teacher who was graduating in the middle of this year from her program, and I didn't want to lose her to somebody else. So I hired this person, used a letter of authorization for her first year, because I know next year she'll have her full license and it won't be a problem. And she wanted to work here, and I wanted to have her. So that gave me the opportunity to hire the best person for the job, even though she didn't have a state license. Yes?
Is that the same thing as a charter-specific license then?
It's not the same thing. Charter-specific, I only have one of those at my school, and actually, I have 2 now. But one of them is for a teacher who teaches foods, and so she does not have a license at all, but she has her culinary arts certificate and program that she went through, and the state's allowed her to have a charter-specific license. And a charter-specific you apply for through licensure folks, and the only way that you get that is jumping through their hoops and making sure they're happy with your choice.
So like with a PE teacher, you can probably do that as well?
In the elementary grades, you could probably do that as well, yes. Once they hit the junior high and you're talking credits, they're going to want a licensed person, so probably a letter of authorization.
Junior high, 9th grade, not 7th and 8th grade.
Yeah, I don't even think 7th and 8th is going to matter, because that's, especially if you're like a K-9 charter school, those are your kids, so you get to decide if they met the requirements for that 8th grade. Funding, this isn't a huge funding issue for schools. Again, this goes down to what we talked about with cactus. If you're being reviewed by this state because they're not sure you're going to make it, or if you're in your first year and you're having to turn in your reports and so forth, they want to see the decision-making you have behind your teaching staff. And just be able to understand why you did what you did, and it's really your call as a school. There are teachers who have maybe an expired license, and they don't have, when you hire them, and it's going to take them more than 3/4 of the year to get that current. I would use a letter of authorization for that person, but I would let them know, I want to hire you, you don't have the right license, this is the only way I can do it, are you okay with that? Oh, yeah, we're good, and so then I do it.
How does this relate to ARL?
ARL separate. ARL does not take any of these letters of authorization. If they are in an ARL program, then that is their letter to work. Yeah, they're authorized to work under that program. So this is a report that's due. I want to say it's due in November. And so you know your teaching staff by then. You can anticipate which ones aren't going to meet the expectations to get into cactus the right way. So you fill these out. I think it's like $45 application fee. Usually I pay that as a school because I hired them knowing they didn't have the right license. And so I took that on knowing that I wanted them, so I'll pay that fee, but they had to do all the paperwork. There's a question here.
Can a person do, say, like 1 year of letter of authorization and then get into an ARL program? And
Sure.
then they could they could keep going?
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. Because ARL is about a 3-year opportunity to earn that degree or to earn your license. So yes, you could. I bet you can even do a mix and match. If they did the ARL and didn't succeed at the end of the 3 years, they could probably do a letter of authorization to buy them another year to finish something. But that's between them and the state, and you just make sure as the director you know
Where they're at?
what you expect for them to maintain their employment.
My question was somewhat related. When you say they get 3, that's for 3 years?
Yes, so you would apply for it each school year, and they get 3 opportunities to use this.
Okay.
And so they could use them 3 consecutive years, they could use it once now and once in 5 years, but this is what they're... I've never actually been in a situation where somebody tried to use it the fourth year and they were caught. So I don't know how they track this, but there's one thing I know, licensure is not the easiest process. And we have some amazing teachers who struggle with getting the state to authorize them to teach every year. And so you try to go through their process as best you can, but this is another opportunity for you as a director of a school to put the right person for those kids in that teaching position, even if they don't have the right license. So don't tie your hands with that. Know that there are some options for you. But this just has to be done in a timely manner. If you miss the deadline, they're not extending it. So just know, this is one of those where you put it on your calendar, you know it's coming, and then that way the teacher's in the right spot.
I have one more question. Is there a limit to how many of your teachers can
Good question.
have this?
I'm going to write that question down because I don't know the answer. I don't think there's a limit.
You obviously probably want every single teacher teaching.
I just think if you know, your judgment might come to be challenged by those you are accountable to. If your board is fine with you doing this process, then really the board recognizes that they might be held accountable by the state. But I think that'd be an interesting concept to just have a school that just says, we're going to do it our way. But the state, you know, I'm going to hold out hope that one day we're going to see a licensure that just basically allows us to hire who we feel is best, and then hold us accountable for what we're doing. Maybe someday we'll have that, and then we can get rid of all 4 layers of this license process. Because there's license, there's ARLs, there's letters of authorization, there's charter specific, and then, yeah, as if I'm going to remember how to do all of those. I just have to try to help my teachers get something.
So I have one more question, sorry.
No, sorry.
My other question is there a good place you could say you could go to that helps to guide through these? Is there a good resource or person or?
Okay, this is being videoed, so I'm going to be careful. But what I will
You
say,
can talk to me after,
I will say the best experience I've had with licensure, as far as employees go, Travis Rawlings at the state office, he's in the licensure department. He's honest and he's respectful. And that's really all I would ask for somebody. He doesn't agree with me on some things, and that's okay, but at least I don't feel like I'm getting the runaround when I talk to him. And I've gone to him and I say, I have this employee, or I have this potential employee with this type of experience or credit. Which pathway would you recommend we use for this person? And that's usually when I want the employee and I want to entice them to come work for me. That's when I start doing the legwork for them. And I go out. If it's somebody who's just as good as somebody else, maybe, then that's when you just say, hey, why don't you contact Travis and let me know which pathway you're going to choose. And you get to decide that. But there's those amazing people out there that you'll go out and fight for them. And we have to sometimes. I would put that in here too. Sometimes your position as a director, they don't just click boxes for you like you wish they would, but at least it gets attention drawn to where it should be when you call and say, I've got this great teacher that you're giving the runaround. What's going on? They've heard 3 stories. What's the reality so I can help them? And then you start to get some answers back. And sometimes the answer you want, sometimes it's not, but at least it's consistent now. And then we can actually do something about it. Is there another question? Okay. Good. That might be another training, honestly. Well, maybe we put that into the HR stuff, because it sounds like there's a lot of questions with licensure, which
Which may be changing soon.
yes, I hope so. All right, school land trust. This is another funding stream that comes with some required reporting. The folks at USOE with land trust, they're really nice to work with. So this is one of those where you shouldn't have any real issues, but if you ever have concerns, you can call them and they're quick to respond. A lot of people who help with school land trust, they're involved parents. And that may also be why they're so nice to work with at USOE, because they work with a variety of expertise in this area. But the reporting of this one is pretty straightforward. There are expectations that you have as the school site director to hold certain meetings. This is similar to the Title I funds, where it lays it out for you that by October 15th, you have to have done this. By November 10th, you have to have done this. And if you just put those on your calendar and make sure that you're getting them done in time, you won't have any issues with land trust. When it comes to land trust, your school needs to have a land trust committee. For many of you, it's going to be your governing board. But it does not have to be. We continue to try to get better understanding from the state on this one. At this point, we have a parent organization who basically makes our land trust committee, and we do a lot of the legwork there and get the reports made, but we still submit our reports to the board for approval. So if the state wants to challenge us on that, then we actually have two committees. But they've gone back and forth on what's acceptable and what's not acceptable when it comes to the parent committee for land trust. And that's mainly because some boards are made up of all parents, and some boards are made up of parents and community members who want to serve on your school boards. Keep your good records here when it comes to land trust. It makes it simple for you. So land trust just depends on the size of your school. We're somewhere around $50,000 or so that we get for land trust. So it's more than just one expense for us. And so when we do our finances and our books, we mark these expenditures as land trust. So then it's easy for us to just pull the report of every dollar I spent on land trust and include that with my reporting that I have to do for this report. This is done through a website that's found on that printout. You go in, you log in, and you just complete it. It's not overly taxing. The main questions they have is, here's what we project we're going to give you as far as funding goes, and they say, how are you going to use this money? And you go through that process of just typing out a simple paragraph of how you're going to use the money. And then you allocate those funds in the right object areas. So if you're going to use it in salaries, or if you're going to use it in supplies, or computer technology, you decide where that money's going to go. And then the other question they usually ask is, if budgets change and you're given more money than what we anticipate giving you, how will you spend it? And depending on your project, you're going to say, we will use the rest of it to pay for the rest of the cost with this, because we're underfunded anyway. Or you might say, that will give us an opportunity to add more things in this area. And then the key to land trust is, once you say it, you have to do it. It's not easy to go back in and amend that, to say, oh, we changed our mind, we now want to buy iPads. Because it runs through this parent committee that's made the commitment. And they don't want to see you going back and forth, twisting the arms of your parents to say, now we want to spend the money this way. So spend the time just putting that report together, and then just keep yourself honest following that report during the year. And when it comes to the end of the year, when you report on your expenditures, this is a really fast one as well. Just don't forget to do it. Put it in your calendar. That's the key to most of these. Don't forget to do them. Yucca is going to take the most time. The rest of them don't take as much time, but you're going to forget about them if you don't mark it out in your schedule. We were just talking about lunch. How many of you working at your school get a half hour or an hour lunch break? Never, right? It just doesn't happen.
That's depressing.
Yeah, no, you're not alone on that, right? So, and you think the longer you're at a school, it gets easier, but it just, you love what you do, and so you fill your time solving problems and helping things grow and develop. And so we're busy, and you'll forget to do these reports. The trick to some of these is your board has to approve them, which means you have to have done all the work before the agenda for that next board meeting is posted. And so if I forget these, it's not as simple as just calling up my board and saying, oh, by the way, can you add this on tomorrow night's board meeting? That is a bad way to build a relationship with the board. And so you need to be thinking ahead of time so that you don't miss your deadlines or put your board in a bad position where you're asking them to approve something and they didn't get a chance to read it. So just be thinking through that as you go through your schedules.
I had something to say. I think what helped us to simplify land trust was to decide what you want to spend the money on, say like just technology or just professional development or just one certain area, because then it simplifies it. Because then your parents can say, okay, let's look at technology and see what technology they need. So we know at Canyon Rim, our land trust money every year is spent on technology. The other thing is to keep your goals really simple, because each goal you put in there, you have to report back on with data. So if you have multiple areas that you're spending your land trust money on and multiple goals, it's much more complicated. Then you have multiple data you have to gather to report on the progress of those goals several times. You have a couple reports throughout the year that shows progress to your goals and your land trust money. So if those goals are aligned to only one big purchase or one area of purchase, and the goals are one or two and very simple, this report can be quite easy, and it helps to lead your parents to an area that you need, but it's more just within a certain area, not just open to anything.
Perfect.
Once we started doing that, this whole land trust became much easier.
Thank you for adding that. And hopefully you see a trend here with all these reports. Think big, so that your tracking and your monitoring of them are much easier for you to report on during the year. Schools that nickel and dime these really get in trouble. And land trust is one of those areas. Thank you for adding that, because I wrote down one other thing I wanted to mention to you is you sit as part of that land trust committee if you're the director at the school. In most cases, sometimes they have an assistant, but usually the director has to be there. Go to that meeting with a plan so that you can help the parents understand your needs. Because in those meetings, you'll get the well-intended parents who want you to buy a balance beam, or they want you to get lights for the stage, or they want you to get this thing that will help their kid or their favorite teacher. There's a way to get those things. I would not recommend you use land trust funds to do it. And so you come in and you help them see how this expenditure will help so many children in the building. And then when they bring up their others, you already can answer that and say, I agree with you. I think the lighting is terrible with our plays, and that's why I'm going to use my general funds over here, and we're going to buy that this year. So you guys don't have to worry about that. I'll take care of it. But these funds, I think, would really help in this way. Because again, your parents mean well. They want to do good things for the kid in the school. But you have a better idea of how all these funding streams work, or you will. And so you'll be able to help guide them to make decisions that don't create a lot of work for you, but we still get the same thing. We all get what we wanted out of it. Technology is a huge one. We use the same thing for technology. We use it for the actual hardware as well as the services to maintain the hardware. So if you have like a group that you outsource this to, and they provide training on how to use your smart boards that you bought, or they provide the service to the equipment that you bought, you can use their service expenses in this area too. We have a 1-to-1 ratio program with iPads for our junior high, and so the last 2 years, that's what I've been using our money for, or a portion of it, because it's more expensive than what I get. And so with that question of what are you going to do with more, then I just simply say, we're going to use it to buy more iPads that we needed anyway. So keep it simple for yourself, and this report won't be as daunting as they make it sound. I think this might be the last one. DMI, this goes back to the Title I and the UCA that we talked about. This is really they call it desktop monitoring information, and this is basically the way that you track your progress with your Title I funds during the school year. Sarah Moore is the one who we're accountable to at the USOE office, and she provides training each year on this. If you use Red Apple or Charter Solutions or one of these other business office managing companies, this is really something they should be doing for you. They will come to you for part of the report, because part of that report is you're reporting on the students that are in the selected group, and you're going to report on gender, ethnicity, and so forth. And your business office does not have that information. So you'll be the one that fills in, it's 2 Excel spreadsheets. You'll complete those, they get submitted as part of this DMI report during the year. And in fact, it's already come and gone, I think. We've already done this one. I think this was back in December or something. So this one's done for the year, but it's another way to just make sure that we've identified students who are receiving Title I funds. I think Joylyn or Tina mentioned that this slide has been emailed to you guys if you had your email in their system, so feel free to copy and paste whatever you want. I didn't really write it to make a lot of sense to everybody, except probably me to help guide my thoughts here. Any questions on DMI? I don't know how much experience you're going to have with this, to be honest, other than these 2 spreadsheets. And again, it stops with you, so you need to make sure that your business office gets this done in a timely manner so that you're not being held accountable where you don't want to be. So this is one of those that should be simple, just don't miss the deadlines for them. Put it in your calendar, you'll be set. Okay. And then I think this last slide is just the catch-all. Yeah. Those are the main ones that are tied to most of your funding. WPU, of course, is most of your funding. You guys get that just for having students in your building. These other ones that we've talked about provide additional funding for very specific reasons in your school. The WPU funding that you get helps you pay your teachers and pay your aides and pay the electric bill and all these things that aren't tied to any of these specific reports that we just went over. You report on those in your first year and in your planning years with that monthly financial and enrollment report that you need to determine. ARL reporting, we talked about ARL a little bit. That is, if you have teachers who are in the ARL program, there's not a whole lot required of you. If you are hesitant on hiring a candidate for your school because they have an ARL, I would encourage you not to be so stressed out about that. It falls on them to do all of their schooling and following up with their program. But once a year, my obligation is I get a letter from USOE that says, you have a teacher in an ARL program, we need you to tell us how they're doing. And so I include in that, it literally is 3 boxes I think you get to choose from. It's this person is highly successful, this person is somewhat successful, this person is not successful or something. So I wouldn't have hired them or kept them on staff if they weren't successful. So I check that box, and then they basically, they have you sign it that they're employed there. And that's one of the papers. The other one is you copy or you just attach your most recent observation or evaluation that you had with the employee. To get an incredible person to be with our students, I think that's worth it. The rest falls on them. That's really all I have to do, is I check a box, I attach a form, and I send it in. So if you see a great candidate that's not licensed, but they are willing to be in an ARL program, I would encourage you not to turn them away. Keep an open mind. Vision screening, this is for your kids who are 8 and under. So if you're in high school, you don't have to worry about this so much, but all of us with the younger kids, you just have to make this part of your yearly plan of who's going to do it, by when, and where. And so I actually have this run. Our instructional aides in kindergarten are full-time, and I have them do it. So the two of those, there's 2 of them. They do the screening for my school, and they turn in the report, and I just follow up with them to make sure that it was done. It's accurate and timely. So you can decide how you want to do this. I don't anticipate any of you will actually be doing the vision screening yourself. So you're going to build capacity in your school to find somebody who's willing to take this on and do a nice job for you so that you can put your energy somewhere else in the building. Lots of times office staff might manage this too, but the instructional aides know a lot of these kids. I choose kindergarten because they know the new ones coming in, and they had the other ones previously, so they actually enjoy doing it. It's kind of a fun thing for them to see the kids they had in the past too. All right, great. We talked about the monthly financial enrollment one for the schools in their planning years in their first year. And again, that's right on the USOE charters, resources and forms, where you can find that one. It's the second or third link on that page. And there's going to be time, so if we want to pull it up, we can even just look at it real quick to see if there's any questions on it. CTE, we talked about the beginning of the year one with the plan. This is the end of the year one that you do. I think it's due by June 1st. And this is one where your CTE teacher is usually gone when this is due. So don't just wait till June 1st to get this one done. This is something that they can turn in before the school year is out. Get it in early so that you're not stuck trying to track down someone in the summertime and taking this on yourself. So just something I've learned from mistakes. Immunization status report. Often the front office staff is going to be the most helpful for this one because they have all the filing and the records of the students with their immunizations. I would be very careful with your immunization records. It's very costly if you don't do these right. If you have students who are not exempt and they're showing up as not meeting the expectations for immunizations, you lose the funding for that student for the entire year, even though you taught them and you've had them in your building. So take this one pretty seriously when you see the report from your office staff that says these 13 kids are not exempt and they have not received the right shots. They're not going to respond well to your secretaries. You know, it's just, that's the way it is. They're gonna ignore their phone calls, they're not, you'll have to get involved. You'll have to, you know, and when we deal at our school, and most people do at their school, is I call them and I say, I understand there's a problem here with immunizations, understand your student can't come to school until they have them done, or until you have an exemption. And we just don't let them come to school, because you're not supposed to let them come to school unless they've received immunization or they have the acceptable exemption forms turned in. So there's options for them, but you're gonna wanna try to be nice and say, oh, I understand, okay, you're gonna get it done next week, and that next week turns into May 30th, and you now are giving back $4,000 to the state that you've already spent. The report, they just sent out a report, there's one or two schools that have in the neighborhood of 25 to 32 kids. And I'm like, that's $150,000 they're gonna have to give back at the end of the year if they don't get their act together. So be careful with that one, especially being a new school. You want kids to come in, you want to fill seats. Just make sure your parents understand the importance of having their records in the school or getting the exemption paperwork that they need to take care of with the state. And you'll have parents who choose not to do the immunizations, and that's fine. They totally have a pathway. The only thing with that one is you need to have a record of who has the exemption status, because if there's a case of chickenpox or a case of measles or something, those kids aren't allowed to come to school for, I want to say it's like 3 weeks, or there's some time period, or 21 days, where you have to call those families and say, so you're aware this is the case, and your student can come back to school on this day. But they know that when they exempt into the program, so just.
And then they should
hold
hold
them
your
accountable.
governor's report has accepted that for the season.
No, you'll be able to document that with your paperwork, your records. You guys you'll run into lots of situations with attendance. Truancy, it's a joke. You really have no teeth when it comes to absences and kids in school. And so you're going to do the best you can to create an environment where kids want to be here, because if they don't want to be here and the parents don't force them to come, there's not a lot you can do. You have a great policy that says you're going to do all these things, and you do them, and it ends with a judgment that never happens from the city or from the state. So just don't lose sleep over those types of things. Just know that you're gonna have great records that show why Timmy has been gone for 37 days out of the first 60, and you're doing everything you can to encourage that student to participate in school. I haven't had to do. You get audited with your attendance and so forth, but as long as you have your attendance contracts, you have the doctor's notes, you have these types of things, plane tickets, like we have a parent who decided, neat experience, and it may fit into some of your charters too. The family was going to Brazil for 4 months or something, because dad was being stationed there and they were going to go, and we ended up getting, that was okay. The kid had a leave flight and a return flight in the records. They weren't unenrolled. They did some packet stuff, and they came back, and it worked out okay. So it's pretty reasonable. Just have a good document trail of what you decided to do and why. Utrex. I understand there's probably lots of questions with Utrex. Utrex, again, is just that system that is linking your SIS to the state office to make sure that they know you have students that you claim you have. It tracks the kids' information to make sure that 2 schools aren't claiming the same student for funding. This is one where, again, build capacity in your school. I don't have a login for Utrex, just so you know, I don't. My secretary goes to the training, and then I work with her just to make sure that we're meeting expectations with deadlines and accuracy in the report. And so maybe that's how you want to run it, maybe it's not. Something to consider. But yeah, hire a really smart secretary so that you get the help that you need. Because it's a lot more can get done if you surround yourself with great people. And et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. This was, the ones that we went over are the ones that are on that printout. Okay, so those are the ones that you have to do. You're a unique school. You may have additional reporting that's expected of you from your board or from if you're an IB school, you'll have some reporting to do with those programs that you're a part of. I don't know if Montessori schools have any accountability or reporting they need to do to an association they might be a part of. But these are the ones that the state expects you to get done at a glance. All of these, there is training provided by the state office, and this is another reason to build capacity. If you went to every training you're invited to, you would never be at your school. So you need to be thinking of who's the right person to help here. There's always people at your school who are aspiring leaders, who want your job one day, and so utilize them. Help them learn, put them to work. They'll learn a lot, and you'll be able to, they'll be happier, doing what they're doing, because they're growing too. Any questions on the reports, or something we did not cover that you were hoping we would?